Right now, the curtain comes down for New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. In office for 12 years, he's now down to just 11 days. So what will his legacy be? Opinions from Chris Smith, reporter for New York Magazine, Ed Cox, head of the state GOP, and Democratic consultant Michael Tobman. And then, who's going to gamble on knocking off New York Governor Andrew Cuomo as the GOP goes searching for a candidate and for someone who can actually win? And later, the Duck Dynasty debate deepens. Did the man with a beard cross the line in his comments about gays and blacks, or is he just the latest prey for the PC police? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us this Friday evening, December 20th. We begin, though, with the end of an era coming to New York City. 2 weeks from now, Michael Bloomberg, he will be on his third day out of politics, and for the first time since just after the 9/11 attacks, there will be a new mayor in New York City, Bill de Blasio. Now, for most people, a first thought of Bloomberg means his social agenda: soda ban, anti-smoking laws, calorie posting, and a whole lot more. Others may think safety and its costs, the drop in crime numbers, no doubt, but also the spike in stop and frisk. Now, for his part, the mayor, he's been trying to cement his legacy, or at least the positives. He's begun a 5-borough farewell tour touting the successes, but the questions do remain: just what will Michael Bloomberg's legacy as mayor be? And for more, we're very pleased to be joined by Chris Smith, contributing editor at New York Magazine, and he's covered obviously a whole lot of figures in and around our area. But speaking of this mayor, he wrote a piece back in September, called "Autocrat for the People," and the subhead says it: when the richest man of the city is also the one who runs it, an assessment of an extraordinary era. And Chris, that's probably the best way to say it, a tumultuous 12 years, but I just think, and I remember candidate Bloomberg, and he had on this, I think it was a bright pink cardigan, walking down the streets of, I think it was Staten Island. I was saying, man, this guy might be able to buy this seat here, but he'll never get it. He'll never relate. He kind of never tried, but he came a lot closer than a lot of people would have thought back then. Really unprecedented what we've seen in the last dozen years, right?
Sure, and you hit it exactly right. The gap between people's feeling for Bloomberg and Bloomberg's feeling for people at large versus what he's actually done for the bulk of New Yorkers is one of the fascinating splits in this 12 years. That, yes, he's a multi-billionaire, in many ways has been true to character throughout. I mean, that's where you start, I think, in defining the Bloomberg era is with business. You know, he was elected largely for two reasons: all the money he spent in his campaigns, and initially the city reeling from the September 11 attacks, and there being real questions about New York as a business center, as a place where people could find jobs, where growth would continue. And Bloomberg consistently, unabashedly in these 12 years has been a pro-growth, pro-business mayor for good and ill.
I think it was years before people really started drilling down and wondering if in crime, and in education, and in housing, Chris, the ledger at the end says this was good for all 5 boroughs, not just Manhattan. Go through those.
Sure. Crime, in simplest terms, thousands more people are alive today than would have been had not Bloomberg and Kelly been so successful in driving down crime pretty much across the board, but most dramatically in shootings and homicides. Do he and Kelly get all the credit for that? Certainly not. You know, the cops on the street deserve most of it, demographic trends, all sorts of other things. But a lot of the tactics that were used as they kept pushing harder and harder, the statistics, the numbers-driven element of the police department kind of took over. And that's where the number of stop and frisks skyrocketed. You had hundreds of thousands of innocent people, mostly black and brown, in the poorer neighborhoods across the city being stopped and harassed. So, yeah, there's a real residue of tension and friction. The tactics were enormously effective on the one hand, but enormously intrusive on the other. You move to education, much more mixed bag. You know, a huge victory at the outset, gaining mayoral control of the public school system from the state of New York. And Bloomberg exploited that control, you know, hiring Joel Klein, a lawyer with a corporate background, restructuring the school system, again, introducing a very data-driven, test-driven approach. There are more good schools in the city than there ever have been, or certainly at the start of the Bloomberg term. But the way he got there, yeah, broke up a lot of the old power structures, irritated the teachers union. Housing, Bloomberg built or preserved is the term, you know, made sure or brought online close to 100,000 apartments over his time in office. But that's, you know, pushing back the tide in a lot of respects. The success of the Bloomberg era, making New York more attractive to people all over the world, making New York more expensive, you know, that is outstripping his efforts to build more affordable housing.
He's a paradox in a lot of ways. I mean, I think only maybe in New York could it fly where he says, I'm not telling you where I'm going for the weekend, that's my time. Speak a little bit to the man himself. He's a mixed bag as a person, isn't he?
Certainly. And, you know, the positive side of that kind of thick skin, it's been caricatured as being out of touch with the common New Yorker. The positive side of that is he had political insulation to do things that a lot of other traditional, conventional politicians couldn't. Smoking ban is the greatest example. Bloomberg came into office with a record and an interest in public health. He really ramped that up over the time in office and pushed through the smoking ban, enormously unpopular then, totally accepted and popular and widely imitated now. So, you know, hundreds of thousands of people are healthier for not smoking, and they have Bloomberg to thank. He wasn't warm and fuzzy in explaining how and why he was going to make that happen and how and why it was good for people. He never tried to fake public empathy. He wasn't good at it. On the other hand, yeah, like you say, he let his feelings be known, particularly his crankiness with reporters frequently. Anybody who opposed him, you know, he had his run-ins with Albany, certainly, and wasn't shy about saying what he thought of the competence and ethics of folks at the state legislature. But I think people underestimate him or misunderstand him in the sense that he does have a real bond with folks who are struggling to make it. I mean, Bloomberg himself came from a very middle-class background, achieved what he did in large part through education, through getting a break and going to Johns Hopkins, and then just working hard every step of the way. Didn't come from money, earned it, had a great idea, built a fortune. And anybody, particularly immigrants, who he sees in a similar boat, you know, he's extraordinary both in his personal feeling and in his actions in trying to help those people. And someone asked me the other day, well, you know, other than yelling at reporters, you know, did he ever show emotion? And I always think back to a funeral probably 6 or 7 years ago for two detectives, undercover detectives on Staten Island, who were shot and killed trying to make a gun buy. And Bloomberg speaking at their funeral, the funeral for one of the detectives, and he, yes, was choked up, he was tearful, but it wasn't just to score sympathy points. You know, he felt it deeply, and then he went out and did something about it. You know, he redoubled efforts both locally and nationally to get guns off the street.
I'm curious, he's a guy, he's a big idea guy, and he doesn't suffer fools gladly. If he had to do it over again, I know he'd never publicly say this, where he was after 8 years rather than the last 4, especially what he's used a lot of his capital for in the last 4, I mean both politically and personally, fighting guns nationally, with national ambitions, trying to change things. Do you think if he had to do it over again, if he had the benefit of hindsight, he would have run for that 3rd term? Good
question. I think there's 2 related questions there. Does he regret not running for president in
Yep.
2008? And then would he do it over again to run for mayor in 2009? The presidential thing, he still wants to be president. He never wanted to run for president, and the rational side of him understood and understands why he really wouldn't have had a chance to win. But I think he regrets not going for it, actually. I don't think he regrets at all running for and winning a third term as mayor. He, knows he, even with $27 billion in the bank, will never have the same power to try to affect change in ways he thinks are positive as when he's got the power and the bully pulpit of being mayor of the city of New York.
Last thing, Chris, and that is his next act. I love, literally within, I think, a 2-day cycle, he says, I'm really going to sit on the sidelines and not criticize the incoming mayor, and I'm going to do everything, and then make sure there's a bunch of projects that A inherits, and then B talks about the differences basically between what the de Blasio era might look like versus the Bloomberg era. But will he be keeping a close eye on New York, or will other initiatives nationally, even globally, be where he's going to be spending his time on?
Both, yes. He's certainly going to pour money and time and effort into things like reducing obesity in Mexico. He's setting up a consulting firm that's going to take a bunch of his top aides from city government and teach others, mostly American cities, how to do it the New York way, whether it's parks or transportation or economic development. I think what we'll see, and we won't see Bloomberg more and less, if that makes sense. He won't be out there commenting, giving speeches about New York-specific issues in the way he has been as mayor, certainly. But his money, the way he's funded things, which has been an underreported thing all along, both how Bloomberg has written checks to underwrite education projects, poverty initiatives, museums, all that stuff. He's going to do that even more, and in New York and around the world. He won't be out there talking about it, but he will be exerting his influence through the channeling of those dollars in New York.
It has certainly been a fascinating 12 years here. And Chris, I appreciate a few minutes from you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
And when we come back here, we're going to bring our panel in. We're going to start our debate on the Bloomberg legacy. Stay with us.